Hello. Hi, welcome everyone. I am Friedel Fink and I'm the founder of Big Sis. And today I'm gonna chat with Giulietta, who's the creatrix of a initiative business called Hormones and Harmony. And we're gonna talk about hormones, nutrition, and the menstrual cycle. For those of you who are supporting girls, so maybe you're a parent, maybe you do experience a menstrual cycle or not, maybe an auntie, maybe you are a father, or maybe you do care for girls in different capacities, maybe you are a scout leader. This talk is for you to, support girls whilst they're going through changes, whilst they're growing up. And we're going to explore today how we can help girls to feel empowered in their bodies and their feelings, to really step into their power whilst their bodies are changing. And Giulietta and I are going to explore some tools today to bring this about. And I see that she's joining me here. And we're just waiting for her request to join. Hey Giulietta, welcome.
Hello, good morning or afternoon
Good
or whatever
morning.
time it is.
What time is it for you?
12 p.m. 12, yeah,
12
midday.
p.m.
So, yeah.
Yeah, great. Welcome. So nice to have you here. We had a chat before on your Instagram Live and
Yes.
talking about my initiative, Big Sis. And today we're going to talk a bit about hormones and harmony, I hope, and explore some tools that, probably some of you listeners, viewers can use at home, practice, and maybe even pass on to the young girls in their care. So we're looking in these conversations a bit through the lens of how can we support girls. But therefore, we explored in our last Instagram live. We need to do the work ourselves. So
Absolutely.
um, yeah, I'd love to hear a bit from you for those who are new to Hormones and Harmony, how
Mhm.
you're working, what you're doing, and maybe how it came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been working in the field of women's health for over 10 years now. I got into nutrition through a chance job at my health food shop, and then in the nutrition field, I started focusing more and more on hormones. Partly because I had my own hormonal challenges. I had fibroids, I had loads of other things going on, and I wasn't really getting the answers I wanted from the medical community, which is not to say there isn't a time and place to go and see your doctor, but I was finding it very frustrating that the only solutions available to me was go on the pill, go on the pill, go on the pill, and I had been on the pill previously, and it doesn't work for me. It just doesn't, right? I just felt crazy and I felt out of control, and actually made me feel very disconnected from myself. So I was then like, I'm on a mission to try and get myself to feel a little bit more in control of everything through nutrition. And that's really when I started going down that path of hormones and nutrition. And that was like, sort of really dug deep, started doing a lot of testing on myself and my clients, and really started specializing in that. And then probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I then started discovering the idea of cyclical living, because up until that point, nobody had really been talking about it. And I look at it
Mm.
now and I'm just like, it's insane that I was doing all this work with hormones and women's health, and you don't even really come across it in like the biology textbooks, you know what I mean? Or anything like that. It's just a kind of like, this happens, that happens, but nobody says, actually, we need to kind of pay attention to the way these hormones fluctuate and really support those fluctuations. And that's when I started doing my real more like cyclical living work, really tapping into what I needed at every point in my cycle and incorporating that with the nutrition and everything else, because I felt that I could only get so far with myself and with my clients. We could only get to this certain point if we were only doing the nutrition work, right? The next step was we are cyclical. We feel differently every week of the month. We have different like cravings, we have different energy levels and all of that. So that's pretty much what I do nowadays, is I pull in the science and all the science geeky stuff, and then I sort of pull it together with the more maybe like spiritual, emotional sort of work, and weave it together so that we can just really step into this idea of being cyclical, right? And just really kind of embrace it. And I think a lot of what I really love doing now is like, it's almost being a permission slip for menstruators to go, it's okay not to feel the same every day of the month. It's okay to wake up on a Monday and go, I'm not feeling it today. You know, fine, we still may have to go to work or whatever, but we don't have to have that guilt of, why do I feel tired today? It's like, I do, because I'm on this part of my cycle, and that's fine. So I'm really motivated by that. And I work with clients one-to-one. I do group programs, and I'm just passionate about spreading the word.
Wonderful. This is a big question that I'm having, but like in a nutshell, could you give us like a little map, like a little overview? What is the link between hormones and the menstrual cycle, and how does nutrition come into there? I think a lot of people joining here might not be aware of that.
Of course, yeah. So the kind of like the female cycle can be divided into 4 phases every month, or however many days your cycle is, right? So I think one of the first things that we sometimes get confused about is your cycle is not just your period. It's from day 1 of the start of one period all the way to the start of your next period. So that is your whole cycle. And in the cycle, every 5 to 7 days, your hormones will change. And it's those hormonal changes that then really influence how we feel. So the 2 hormones we're primarily talking about are estrogen and progesterone. Those are the 2 main female hormones. And estrogen is like, it gets called like the Beyonce hormone. It's like, woo, I'm here. Look at me, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And progesterone is more like a calming, nesting, quite focused hormone, you know, but it's got this element of like calmness to it. Like estrogen's a bit crazier, and obviously they're there to support ovulation, post-ovulation, and to support us getting pregnant. But obviously we might never want to get pregnant, and we certainly don't want to get pregnant every month, but they kind of fit in. Those are the biological reasons for them doing this every month. And then, you know, they just influence absolutely everything. So if we then chunk down the 4 phases, we start, the first phase is basically when we bleed, our periods, menstruation. I like talking about them in terms of the inner seasons, because I like the idea of really having that connection with the earth, with Mother Nature. And it's a very easy model to refer to, right? Because we all know how we feel when it's winter, spring, summer outside. So the first phase is your inner winter, your menstruation, and that starts first day of your period. Now, this is when both hormones are at their lowest. So when they're at their lowest, we can feel a bit tired, you know, we feel like going inwards a bit. We feel like sleeping more, our energy is low. And I think one of the main struggles we have is that, you know, we're kind of conditioned to push through it. And it's almost like if we kind of surrendered a little bit, and it's not always possible, I understand, but if we sometimes just stopped for 5 minutes, that's can make a huge difference to this part of the cycle. Also, we're losing blood, right? So we need to support ourselves with food that will help us replenish our iron, replenish our minerals. You know, in terms of nutrition, I always say, well, how do you eat when it's winter outside? You know, when it's winter, we very, very rarely want to eat a cold salad. I don't know about you, but, you know, I'm just like, oh no, you know, so it's about having like warming soups, casseroles, stews, all of that kind of food. So it's not even the nutrition side. You can get really geeky and really precise, or you can just keep it really easy to follow, fun and enjoyable, you know, and you just always go by that principle, well, what do I eat when it's this outside? But I would definitely say just having that awareness around like iron foods is really important. And especially actually when we're talking about young women and young girls, right? Like, this is something really, really important to think about, because You know, sometimes, and especially nowadays, we're seeing girls with quite heavy periods, and that can really cause a lot of discomfort and a lot of tiredness. So if we're replenishing with these foods, this is like such an important thing to do, to really help support them. And it's such an amazing habit to get into, you know, like from an early age. It's like, you know, maybe you have a smoothie with loads of spinach in it or something, you know, we could make it quite fun. But I would say that's, especially for young girls, this is a wonderful place to start. And I love using nutrition in the cycle because it's a great way to anchor you into working with your cycle. It's not complicated, you know, and it's really nourishing. So that's your inner winter, and that's kind of like when you finish bleeding, then you're moving into what we'd call the inner spring. And you know what's happening in spring, everything's starting to grow and starting to come to life, and that's exactly what's happening in our bodies. Our estrogen, so that hormone that's like the Beyonce one, is starting to rise, and we're just like, hello, you know, and you're like, hi, I'm here, hello world, hello everyone. And it's rising slowly. So it's a bit like spring. I mean, it's definitely spring in the UK. You know, you get one nice day and then you get another 2 or 3 slightly crappy days, and you're like, oh. So spring can be a little bit of a roller coaster sometimes. It's not always necessarily a smooth one, but you do suddenly realize that you're starting to think a lot more about the outside world. You know, you're starting to think a lot more about that, getting out there, socializing. You're starting to have more ideas, more inspiration. You know, potentially, like girls who are in school, they might be more interested in their schoolwork, you know, like they might be like, oh, I actually want to do this now. You know, for those of us who work, we might be like, oh yeah, I really love my work at the moment, I've got all these ideas, you know. So it's this kind of being very like in tune with how this kind of sort of presents itself in our day-to-day life. And then in terms of the nutrition at this time, it's like, you know, if you think about spring, you know, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I do feel like eating something a bit fresher. You know, I'm not completely put off by the salads or the crunchy veg. And you start building in slightly more, like fresher foods and stuff. And, you know, you maybe go for lighter things, like you grill your foods rather than like making them into a big soup. This kind of idea. But, you know, again, it's really gentle, really easy. And just always think about what you would do like during spring. You know, and then it's hard to tell when you go from spring into summer, and I would say to people, don't worry about it too much, you know what I mean? Just kind of enjoy it and just feel into it, because summer is when our estrogen hits its peak, and that's when we ovulate, right? So we produce this little egg, it pops out of the corpus luteum and it comes down the fallopian tube. And obviously this is when biologically we just feel our best in some ways. We have the most energy, we want to get out there, you know, we can literally do 1,000 things in one day. And again, let's relate this to like work or school. This might be when you're just like, oh, you know, like I've got all the energy to like do all my homework and like after school clubs and this and that and the other. Do you know what I mean? And then it's like, it's such a sort of, it's a time that society sort of like likes the most, if that makes sense. So therefore we kind of feel very comfortable in it. And in terms of food, it's all about the really fresh, light stuff at this time. This is the time to go for the salads, the smoothies. We just don't feel as hungry because estrogen suppresses our appetite. So we just don't feel as hungry. You know, those days when you're like, you know, I could eat a salad and I'm fine the rest of the day. You know what I mean? And then literally fast forward like 2 or 3 or 4 days and you're like, oh my God, I'm so hungry, you know, and it's kind of because your estrogen is dropping. So this is the fresh time. And I would say to support something like ovulation, you know, eating eggs is fabulous because, you know, an egg has B12, which is amazing for egg health. Eating just lots of fresh stuff and just really, really supporting like the detox of estrogen, because we have to pull it out as well. So lots of fresh things, lots of fun, and honoring, you know, if we don't want to eat that much, it's absolutely fine. You know, sometimes we get told, don't we, you should be eating 3 meals a day, you should be doing this. And I'm sure this happens, especially young girls may be told by their parents or their teachers or something. It'd be like, oh, you know, why are you not eating as much? And actually that may just be that you don't need to eat as much in this phase. So having that awareness can be really, really important. So then we finish ovulating, our estrogen comes down, and we head into what we call the inner autumn, which is sometimes the most challenging season for a lot of women and girls, because this is where you can tend to have PMS sometimes. This is where the cravings start appearing. You know, all of these things kind of live at this end of the cycle because it's quite complicated in terms of hormones. Estrogen drops, then progesterone, which is the hormone that we produce in preparation for pregnancy. You know, the body doesn't know if you're pregnant or not, so it always produces the progesterone. It's always ready. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're not pregnant. Everything comes down. It's like a dance. If you were to ever look at a chart, this part of the month is a bit like this, right? Which we can see how that can lead to these feelings sometimes of PMS, of anxiety. We also need to eat more at this time. So in the same way that we didn't need to eat very much like a week ago when we were ovulating, we need more food now because we're getting ready to shed our womb linings. We're getting ready for a period. And I think one of the main things at this point is so many women I know, they try to control their eating because they feel that their hunger is out of control and they don't trust their bodies. And actually, I invite you to just set yourself this challenge of making the biggest, most nourishing meal you could ever make, to the point where you're like stuffed. Do you know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, I feel great after this. And then just honoring the fact that you need more food at this time. And what kind of foods? Well, think about autumn. What do we like eating in autumn? We love like all the pumpkins, all the squashes, all those orange foods are so good for us at this time. They're also they're like good carb foods, right? And we need the carbs. We really need them at this time. So for anybody who's like trying to restrict what they eat, this time can be really challenging because your body's screaming for these foods. So, and honestly, it's a game changer when you just start feeding them what you need. Like I posted yesterday in my stories, I made this sweet potato brownie recipe, which was really, really easy to make because I'm in my inner autumn now. And I was like, I need to make something. If I don't, the next couple of days, I'm just going to be wandering around like a crazy woman trying to eat things, you know? So, and these sweet potato brownies are fabulous. I had some last night. I'm going to have some after my lunch. And they will hit the spot, and I'll just, you know, I won't have all that internal battle, you know, going on in my head. So loads of lovely, like nice carbs, you know, brown rice, quinoa, all of those things, you know, dark chocolate, have a bit of extra sweetness, just enjoy it and embrace it because your body really, really needs it at this time. And then, yeah, we come to the end and we start the cycle all over again, back to winter, back to bleeding, etc.
Wonderful. You gave us a little tour, like a culinary tour through the seasons, I feel. And yeah, looking at your blog as well, I saw you have some recipes there, and I thought, like, looking through it, oh, this is like a really wonderful exploration you can start. For example, if you have a daughter, like preparing something together, and maybe doing a little bit of reading on Giulietta's blog about the benefits of these foods. And just the recipe you just shared, I think is a wonderful way of maybe also learning together, because it's not that we as adults have it all figured out, as you talked about, as many of us know from our own experiences. There is this information out there that isn't always like the most holistic, and we do need to learn and sort of see what works for us as well. So I feel really grateful about having these additional inputs, especially with nutrition. It's also been my journey that helped me a lot with regulating my cycle and actually having less pain in my periods, especially in the premenstruum. So it's really great that you're working, creating this awareness. And from my experience of working with young people as well, they really can relate to the seasons. And therefore it's such a great tool to learn more and keep observing our patterns, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I love what you said about, you know, mothers and daughters, or even, you know, fathers and daughters, or the family, just everybody like cooking and just using, like I said, it's that food to anchor a little bit the awareness around the menstrual cycle, because it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's supporting your body, but it's also something you can do like as a sort of like form of bonding, or just to kind of like, you know, because sometimes these conversations, we've talked about this when we had the live last time, sometimes these conversations are quite hard to have between parents and daughters, or mothers and daughters, but like having food as a focus is a really fun way of, you know, not having too much of a maybe serious conversation. You know what I mean? You obviously, you still want that, but how fun to then go, okay, well, you know, maybe you're going to get your period in a few days time, so how about we cook this, you know, let's have this amazing snack ready for when you have your period. Or maybe the mother would say the same thing, so I'm going to have my period in a week's time, why don't we make something, we can put it in the freezer, and then when we have our periods we can go there and grab our little snack and just sort of like support each other in that way.
Yeah, exactly. You talked about something really crucial, which is about I can't I can't find the link again, but I think I wanted to ask you about stress hormones as well, because you said we have sometimes difficulties of slowing down in the when our hormones drop, basically after ovulation. How, if we don't slow down, if we don't take these 5 minutes that sometimes are necessary for us to feel good, what effect does this have on our hormonal cycles, and therefore our periods, maybe, or our whole menstrual cycle?
Yeah, no, that really good question, because they're all interrelated, right? So all of these hormones, so whether they're stress hormones, whether they are female sex hormones or thyroid hormones, they're all made from very similar raw materials. They all need the same building blocks. And what the body does is it generally will prioritize the manufacture of stress hormones, because stress hormones keep you alive, right? So you have to make them. If you stop making cortisol and adrenaline, you're not going to have the energy to run away from the danger, which is basically what we are sort of primed to do. Obviously, the danger in those days, to quote the classic example, was the saber-toothed tiger. And now the danger is like text messages, emails, you know, all of these things. But the physiology, the way we react is exactly the same. So what happens is, you know, we end up in this situation. So for example, struggling to rest or give ourselves like those 5-10 minutes, maybe in the build up to our periods or during our periods. You know, that sends this message of threat and of danger to the body. So the body is like, oh shit, you know, like this is dangerous. So we need to focus on making stress hormones, keep this body going, and all the other ones, they don't actually matter that much. So they'll get kind of sidelined and a bit ignored. Also, don't forget that if the body senses that the environment is too dangerous, too much of a threat, it's not a safe environment to have babies in, right? So it doesn't matter whether you want to consciously have a baby or not. Biologically, that's what your body is going to be primed to do. So what you end up in the situation where you can get irregular periods, painful periods, missing periods, you know, all of these things, because all of your hormones that are meant to be keeping your cycle running in a very healthy, regular way are completely just put to the side. You know, the priority is let's make cortisol, let's make adrenaline, blah, blah, blah. And we're in this very fight or flight mode. You know, and this, I think, is a reality for women and girls of every age group. You know, we all have our stressors, we all have things that really kind of stop us from relaxing, really, and from going into these rested states. So that's where we end. That's why I love to use a cycle as an opportunity to give myself permission to rest. You know, like it's almost like when I get my period, sometimes I actually feel quite energized like during my period, but I'm like, no, even though you want to do loads of things, use this. Literally, it's just half an hour. It doesn't have to be taking off 5 days, you know, like we have to be realistic. But I will take that half hour off. I'll listen to meditation, I'll have a bath, whatever it is, to really show my body that I'm honoring what's happening inside. And that is enough to send this message to your brain that everything is okay. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, okay, this is not a threat. This is not a dangerous situation. Fine. We can balance hormones. Everything is safe. We can carry on making hormones so that we can have babies. It's this kind of idea. It's like quite a basic messaging that has to go on with our brains. The brain, all it ever wants to know is, am I safe? Literally, that is the biggest question the brain is always asking itself.
Yeah, that's such amazing awareness. And I think for all of us to recognize when this is happening for us, and then take a step back and do something that feels soothing, whatever that might mean to us. No, I mean, the classic is the bubble bath, or doing a guided meditation, or maybe just sitting, or eating something mindfully even. It's just so crucial. Thank you for bringing that. So I think it would be really nice if we have a couple of more minutes to understand a bit more what we could possibly do to pass on this knowledge. We explored a little bit with like food, maybe cooking together, but with the actual menstrual cycle awareness, what could, let's say, a carer do, or someone who is in a caring position for daughters? What could be the first steps for them to take? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like having an awareness of your cycle, so maybe tracking, your cycle, and it doesn't have to be complicated, like, downloading an app, a very simple period app, and then maybe getting your daughter to do the same, or, encouraging, and that's quite fun, because it's an app and you can put data in and stuff, and just starting to develop an awareness of where you are in your cycle. I think and then what I see is everybody then makes the journey their own, so I, for example, track across a million different things. I have my apps, I've got it on my laptop, I've got my journal. That's just my personal preference. Some of my clients absolutely love putting everything into the app, and they love looking at that, and I would just say it's such a fun first stage, but it brings so much awareness, because even if it's just on the first day of your period, you pick up your phone and you go, day one, you're just creating this connection, aren't you? And then, like, apps are great because they will give you all this other, information, like your last cycle was this days, blah, 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 blah. A lot of them will tell you roughly when you're ovulating. Now, they're not ovulation predictor sort of like tools, but they will give you a vague idea. So then the next thing that might happen is like, oh, that's so interesting. I remember that weekend when I was ovulating because I did this, and, I felt really good. And that's where you start making those little connections. A good place. Oh, I think you have. Oh, you're back. Yes. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Yes. Yeah, so I think that's a really, really great place to start. And having those conversations, with all my clients, with everyone, I'm always talking to, like, where are you in your cycle? Like, what day are you on? Where are you? And tying it into an app, I think that is a really, really good place to start. And then potentially, if something comes up, so say like there's a particularly like a day with a lot of emotional challenges, or a day when, there was a problem in school, you can then always go back to the app and go, okay, this is interesting. It's like, I always hate being at school 5 days after ovulation. You know what I mean? And it's so good to sort of just seeing these patterns. But I really think a really simple way of tracking is just so powerful. So I would say that's one of the first things that like anyone can do. And again, that's a wonderful thing that a mother and daughter could potentially do, or an older sister and a younger sister, or kind of like, or a group of friends as well, just really opening that space to talk about it.
I had a little scroll on your website. You also have a guide to empowered hormone health there. Which is actually sort of an introduction to cycle tracking.
Yes.
So I recommend people checking that out. That's on your website, which I will include in the notes for this talk. As the last thing, I'd love to know, because it's always a big question for me, like what empowerment means to people, and love to know what is it to you?
I think empowerment for me is a number of things. I think, first of all, it's like, for me, it's all around cyclical living and feeling empowered no matter how I feel. So it doesn't have to be a feeling of motivation and I feel empowered when I'm at peace with the way I'm feeling. And I think I feel empowered when I'm embodied and I'm like, okay, so this is happening for me today. I'm okay with that. I understand why it's happening, and I will support myself in whatever way. So it's, for me, the empowerment comes from shedding the guilt, really dropping into my body and respecting what it needs. yeah, and just shedding everything that I think I should be feeling, and just being okay with the way I am feeling. And sometimes, you know, we're not always okay when we feel anxious and when we have PMS, but just holding a bit of space for myself in that moment, and not feeling guilty about it, and maybe trying to work out, is there something I can do to support myself? Do I need 5 minutes of just getting away from my screen? Do I need not to be talking to this person today? You know what I mean? Those kinds of things.
Yes.
And it's just, yeah, just, I think it's that embracing the cyclical way of living, and being okay with not feeling okay all the time, and using it always as a tool to just understand myself better, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense, and I love this definition.
Thank you.
Which might also change over time.
Oh yeah, if you asked me like last
yeah.
week, it would have been something completely different.
Let's track that with the menstrual cycle. What does empowerment mean to you during your period?
Exactly, because it is, you know, you're so right. I think it's going to mean different things at every point in your cycle. Like when you're ovulating, your empowerment might be something completely different to when you are, you know, like menstruating. Maybe your power and your empowerment in menstruation is just about stillness and sitting in the stillness, you know. And then the empowerment in ovulation is going to be something much more like, you know, like energized, and maybe channeling this energy in a specific way. And yeah, so you're so right, it could easily change.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would love people to know? Any last things you want to share?
I think we've covered everything, you know. I would just say to anybody watching, it's like, you know, if you're kind of a bit interested in this, just, you know, that social media is amazing now for there's so many amazing accounts to follow. And, you know, I think just follow your gut instinct on it all, and see where it takes you, and just be open to receiving the messages, and have fun with it, because it is so much fun, you know, working with your cycle and things. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to add, really.
Lovely, Giulietta. Thank you so much. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
everyone watching, and I'll include all the notes and some cycle tracking apps as well into this post. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All the best on your journey.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you. Bye.
Yes, bye.
Bye.